Probably one of the most beloved movies of all time is the 1939 classic based on the Frank Baum book, The Wizard of Oz. Generation upon generation has enjoyed this tale of Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Scarecrow, and their adventures in the land of Oz. Marx was actually connected to this story, sort of. Today's story will take us back to 1967. In 1967, MGM Studios decided to try to copy the very successful format designed by Walt Disney of an anthology series, where they would use their movies, divided into pieces, to make a weekly television show. Disney started doing this way back in 1954 and had many derivations of the show, from Walt Disney Presents to Walt Disney World of Color to The Wonderful World of Disney. In 1967, MGM partnered with ABC and decided to come up with their own anthology series referred to as Off to See the Wizard. The new anthology show aired on Fridays on ABC at 7:30 during the 1967-68 season. The show had a very interesting and talented cast. The Cowardly Lion was voiced by Mel Blanc. Dorothy was voiced by Jane Foray, who also was the Wicked Witch. Dan Messick was the Tin Man and Toto the dog, and Dawes Butler was the Scarecrow and the Wizard himself. The entire series was narrated by Hal Holbrook, and the animation was done by, and the series directed by, the legendary Chuck Jones. So it wasn't for a lack of star power that the series did not catch on. But for 1967 anyway, it was quite a stir. The format of this anthology series was very basic. The Chuck Jones cartoon characters handled the intros at the beginning of each week. They handled the exits and the wrap-up at the end of the show. The movies themselves, which were divided into segments and shown over a couple of weeks, the same as Disney had been doing, largely were not animated films, they were live action. It was a range of MGM products. Some of their biggest hits: Flipper, Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion, and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. There were also some products, some films that have been lost to the sands of time. Films that really aren't remembered anymore. Zebra in the Kitchen, Gypsy Colt, and a very obscure Alexander the Great film from 1963, which starred Adam West and William Shatner. For a television series that only lasted one season, there are an incredible number of toys associated with Off to See the Wizard. Mattel probably was the company that did the most with the product, but many people got involved. There were color forms. There was a Mattel Jack-in-the-Box, complete with the Scarecrow jumping out of the box. There were jigglers, those oily, rubbery figures that were so popular in the 60s and 70s and encompassed everything from cartoon characters to spiders and bugs. There was a board game produced by Milton Bradley. There was a pull-string cloth puppet produced by Mattel, not unlike an oven mitt, which was a very unusual toy and very hard to find today. And there were even Ozkins produced by Aurora Toys. Now, Ozkins were kind of unique in that Aurora came the closest to actually identifying this as the Wizard of Oz. If you watched the series, if you looked at the promotional items, they skirted around the name Oz. They used Off to See the Wizard, they used the character names, but they did not use the term Oz because a competing network still had the rights to show the Wizard of Oz movie every year. ABC was a little bit doubtful that they would be able to get away with using the term Oz in the show without being sued, so they danced around that issue. So how do we connect Louis Marx to all of this? Well, by 1967, Louis Marx was the undisputed toy king of the world. He was producing toys sent all over the globe, multiple factories, 3 here in the United States, and produced toys in virtually every category you can think of, from dolls to electric trains, board games to ride-on toys. Now, Louis was not afraid to reach for his wallet when he thought that a licensing agreement would make a good, profitable toy. Many people in the collecting community seem to think that Marx was on the cheap side, but when he knew something would work, he was willing to pony up with the dollars. He had a long-standing relationship with Disney and made many, many Disney toys over the years. He had licensing arrangements with Gunsmoke, with Roy Rogers, the Flintstones, the Untouchables, Popeye, Have Gun Will Travel, just to name a few. And when he saw this new idea, he wanted in. Marx decided to produce a series of figures of the main characters of the show. If you do a little research on Off to See the Wizard, you'll find many wonderful toys. We've discussed some of them already, but there's very little information on the Marx entry in this line. Marx produced a series of figures in their Japanese factory for distribution in the United States and Europe. And these 3 figures are extremely hard to locate today. They made a figure of the Scarecrow. This is the Scarecrow. You'll notice it is a wind-up. All of these figures are wind-ups. They have a vibrating motor underneath, and all of them have this distinctive Marx logo and verbiage on the bottom. They also made a figure of the Cowardly Lion. Again, it's a vinyl figure with a wind-up mechanism inside, and it should vibrate when you wind it and set it on the table. And they also made a figure of the Tin Man. And as I say, when you wind these up, they vibrate. Marx made these in other formats too. There are some Adventures of Robin Hood figures and others out there, all coming out of the Japanese factory. But these 3 figures for Off to See the Wizard are extremely hard to locate today. They didn't make anybody else. They did not make a Dorothy figure. They did not make any of the other characters of the series, just these 3. And most collectors have never even seen them. You don't see them in the secondary market, and even some of the various fan sites that I visited having to do with the Off to See the Wizard TV series mention many of the wonderful toys that I've talked about already, but don't even mention these Marx figures. Maybe they don't even know they exist. So why did the TV series Off to See the Wizard and also the figures not really do that well. There are a number of theories out there, but probably the two most reasonable. First, anthology series had been done since 1954 and done in a very good way by Disney. It wasn't something new. It wasn't an idea that sparked a lot of interest. But more importantly, in 1967, Fridays at 7:30, this series went up against another cultural phenomenon that had just started recently, the Western series, Wild Wild West. Well, that concludes today's episode of Kruger Street Stories. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so that you can know about each video as soon as it's posted. And if you liked this video, here's a video we think you'd like to watch next.